Starting to get sunny. There's somebody with a pair of glasses on. Great boy.
Speaking of the sun, it looks like it's going to be pretty wet this week.
It does. It does. The forecast. The problem is the forecast here as well. It's a wee bit changeable. It's 300 kilometres, 200 miles from the coast, but it seems to be where two fronts sort of meet, and at that point, it can rain. But what I've noticed over the years is that the weather forecasting the week before for the race is kind of not that relevant. When you get to Friday, Thursday afternoon and Friday, you can predict the race. On Monday, Tuesday, then it can change so easily that you know if it's going to be cold or hot, but you don't necessarily know if it's going to be wet or dry.
Do you find Audi Sports weather predictions are better than the local Le Mans news station?
The thing about it is the trust. You need to have a lot of trust in your weather forecasting, and to get the trust, you need to have gone through it a few times to know that their predictions were correct, and then you can bring it back from there. And we've been quite fortunate over the years that we've been pretty much on the mark, and down to sort of the minute on the mark of when it's going to rain, where it's going to rain, how much, because it's not just a case of with it being such a long track, it's not a case of it's going to rain and that's it. If it rains at Mulsanne, it can just rain at Mulsanne and nowhere else, and that's a tricky section, but there's another 12k of the circuit, 8 miles or whatever. And I would say that our weather forecasting is pretty good, but it's a little bit as well of what the radars say, but also what experience says. And we've got a bit of that with our forecasting guys, but also at Audi Sport.
What does your experience say? Do you think
experience say I think that it's probably going to be wet tonight. It'll be wet tomorrow, and chances are it could be a bit more dry at the weekend.
Really?
Yeah. If it is, look, we're talking about it because there's, Lucas de Grassi's never raced here before. Ollie's done basically a couple of runs, but they were asking about what's it like racing in the rain at night. Racing in the rain at night is not a lot of fun if it's heavy wet. The worst point though is if you're in the car when it is starting to rain, because you don't necessarily see how much it's raining, and it can suddenly be fine at the first chicane, but the second chicane it's heavy rain, and it's trying to judge all of that and take your risk assessment into it, and that's a really hard part about it. So overall, I think everybody doesn't necessarily appreciate if it is going to be like that, but if it is, it's the same for everybody, and you've got to get on with it. It's part of the race, it's part of the difficulties of the race, and it brings in just another dimension.
With the large range in both speed and driver experience out there, especially some of the newer people in the DTMs, how crazy does that make this track if it should just turn into a completely wet race?
Forget the wet, even in the dry, because in the now, we've improved the car from last year. If I just take our situation, we've improved aerodynamics, have improved hybrid, we've got a bit more out of it. We've understood how to make the e-tron quattro aspect of it a bit more efficient and better performance, obviously. Tyres have improved, and so therefore our corner speeds are hugely quick, hugely fast now.
Even over last year's car?
Even over last year's car. And so from that point of view, our speed differential to a GT car in Porsche or Indy or even breaking into Mulsanne is significantly more than it was. And you're having to very much predict what they're doing and going to do much earlier. And also I've noticed as well, silly little things like there's a curbing on the inside of the long right-hander at karting. And that curb seems to, for whatever reason, or because of it or not, I don't know, but the GT cars in the pre-test were maybe about another half metre, 3/4 of a metre out away from it to what they were in previous years, which means that there's half or 3/4 of a metre of track that I cannot use any longer, and so going around them is much more tricky, and you're closer to the dirty line, and so there's always this evolution that you're trying to predict and take into account. But when you've got a speed differential of 60, 70 miles an hour, that means your decision point is, hundredths of a second, not tenths of a second, certainly not seconds.
I've heard, of course, in the photo meetings about all the new red zones and the changes made for photographers like me. You mentioned one change. Are there any other major changes to the course this year over last year?
There's some changes. At Tetra Rouge, they've got rid of the yellow baguettes and they've dug in, if you think of digger grooves like they had at the Exeter karting corner last year, and that's actually been since the pre-test they've put that in. There's been no specific changes apart from where Rocky had his shunt a couple of years ago. On the inside of those curbs they've now put a bit of tarmac, which gives you a bit more security, but it's quite a big bump to get up onto that, so it's not something you really want to use at 200 mile an hour.
Sure.
But it might be a better solution than what happened to Rocky. And the only other thing is that the tarmac, I think, is cured on the Mulsanne Straight, and so it's got a heck of a lot more grip than it had last year. I think that winter, just taking all the oils and things out of it, because it was newly laid for last year's race, has definitely gone now, and it's just got residual grip, and you can feel that in the wet and the dry. And so it's quicker, without doubt, because of that.
How do you see your car is definitely faster over last year? You mentioned the additional grip. How do you see tomorrow night when we get into qualifying? Do you see those times going down from last year?
I think the weather's probably going to play a bigger part of it. I would say right now the chances of having dry running or decent dry running's not that high. I think it'll be more like it was, say, in 2007, where it became dry on Thursday night 5 to 12, and I remember myself and Sarazan going at it. And you've got basically one lap to do it, and what you've got's what you've got, whether you've got traffic or not, it doesn't matter, what you've got is what you've got. So I think it's probably more likely to be a little bit like that. If it's purely dry, I would have to say yes, we will be faster.
You mentioned the aerodynamics and how much better grip you have. Is the spoiler something you're at liberty to speak about? Or
the spoiler, you mean the rear wing?
Yeah. Or the
wing. It's on the back of the car, just so you know. Yeah, the aerodynamics of the package, it's not just about one part of it. No. There's been a lot of improvements, and that's from the front of the car to the back. It's a little bit less pitch sensitive as it was before, so therefore it's got a more constant grip through the speed range of corners, and I wouldn't put it down to any one part. To be honest, I would say that there's quite a lot of general development areas there, and it's an ongoing process, because if I look at 2011 to 12 car, there was a step, 12 to 13 there's a step, and these are very, very highly sensitive aerodynamic cars nowadays, and they interact with a lot of different things, and they interact in a different way going forward to laterally, and so when they're in yaw state, then there's a lot of forces acting upon it. And so it's a little bit of a black magic, I still think, but they seem to know what buttons to press right now.
Seems to be a very effective black magic.
Yeah, it does, but it's not an easy thing. And I'd say the understanding of all of that and what we need is improving. I think as well it improves with the rest of the car, and an understanding of the whole concept, which for me was one of the biggest developments over the winter, was using all of the potential of the different areas of the car together as one car instead of separate bits and pieces.
Interesting. You guys walk into this race, but you enter this race in a bit of a flip situation where Audi has traditionally been, where some of the more heavy-hitting opponents you've had here, be it Peugeot or now Toyota, have had speed on their side in the past, and Audi has had efficiency. With the fuel rolling and with the newfound speed, it almost seems like that's reversed.
Well, certainly in the past, we've been in a position to try to use some of the tools to our advantage. Reliability was always one that we had up our sleeve. We had consistency was another, and we could generally try and eke out another lap on the fuel. Now with 58 litres in our tank and 76 in the Toyota, it's not going to be easy, that's for sure, because that equates and it's very quick mathematics that every lap they do longer than us on a tank of fuel is roughly about half a second, 6/10 of a second. We need to be faster than them every single lap of the race just to be equal. And so if it's 2 laps and it's over a second, we need to be quicker. And that puts pressure on us in a different way that we used to put pressure on the rest. Now, if I'm honest with you, you would always want to have a bit of speed up your sleeve. You know, we didn't come here in 2008 with the philosophy that we were going to be slowly catch the monkey. We were up against it. You know, the competition was bloody fast, and we had to try and counteract it any way we could. And that was all we had in our pockets. We didn't have much else, but we've now developed in quite a lot of speed into the car, and that's been an ongoing process. Hoping, because I'm never totally confident around here, but hoping we still have kept all the reliability. This place is pretty tough on the car nowadays. And the other factor is that we've got I think we've clearly got the brains to make sure we do the right strategical game. But when I say that, it depends on the opposition, because ultimately we will not know what their game is until probably 3 hours into the race. And then we have to react to it. But we've only got 21 hours to make sure we react to it in the correct way.
Do you have any projections or any gut estimates on how many more laps the fuel will gain?
I would expect them to do 2 more laps.
Do you really? That's some pretty decent pressure that they'll put upon you.
I would expect, but you never know.
Oh. Well, last question. I'm sure you're a popular guy today. New team, well, somewhat new team this year. New engineer and a replacement for Dindo, a very fast replacement for Dindo.
You never get a replacement for Dindo, do you?
Well,
he's irreplaceable. Look, he's still here, for goodness sakes.
I saw him up above watching everything above the garage last night at the autograph session. It's great to see him. But you've got a new teammate to kind of bring into the fold if he can try and fill those shoes, which are big shoes to fill.
He's got big feet, don't worry.
But, well, he definitely, looking at the data from last year, he's definitely quick.
Oh, no, there's no question. If we go back to last year, you know, Tom and I knew that Dindo wanted to call it a day. And obviously, you can't replace that sort of relationship that certainly we all had together. I think it was the longest standing Le Mans driving trio in history, as I understand. I'm not sure if it's totally true, but that's what I've been told. And if I think, you know, the first time that I met Dindo was Sebring 2000, when I just joined Audi my first test, and a guy that didn't speak any English smoked like a blooming steam train, and drank coffee like you wouldn't believe, and couldn't run the length of himself without getting out of breath. And then the guy at the end was just a completely different character, but the journey in between was fantastic. Like the fun we had. Some of the stuff definitely can't be on video, and a lot of it can be, but a lot can't, and you can't replace that sort of time period. But with Loic, we know very easily that he's fast. We know what he's capable of. We saw it in the Orica car at Sebring a few years ago. We saw it in, obviously, our car here at Audi, and his personality fitted in quite well. There's been I would say, there has been a process also with our new engineering group, because last year we ran through 4 engineering groups through the year just the way it worked out, which wasn't ideal. You know, you're changing that situation isn't what you need for a World Championship season. But we've got Kyle and DB, and for me with Kyle, like Kyle's like 6'5", and there's me, just bizarre in a lot of ways. But they work well together, and together with Tom, like us, engineering and Florian as well coming in on the side from Audi Sport, it is starting to really fall into place. It's starting where we can bounce off each other and understand each other, and we don't have to sort of work out, did you mean this or did you mean that, because you know, instinctively. And that was there with Indo because of the period of time that we'd grown up together. And with Loic and with everybody else, it's coming together now. And these relationships are built over time, and they're built over experiences. And so far we've done 2 races together as a unit, but right now just having our pre-qualifying discussion it's quite clear that we're of the same mindset, and we're also of the same thought processes in these very difficult conditions where you could do 2 or 3 different things, that we all feel exactly the same way, and that's a positive thing, because that builds a trust, and that trust is the key factor.
All right, cool. Well, I wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.